Yeah. So I've got it going, but I just like one like I wanted to just know like personally like what because I've been trying to think about it. And I just want to know like what religion like means to you, like sort of, and I don't know like where you would like start with that, I guess.
So I forget who it was on the Discord, but somebody said I'm a denomination of one, and I kind of am. So I've I've been religious since I was young, and I've gone through like uh, I lived in what's called the ultra Orthodox Jewish community
Mhm.
for about 10 years. Um, and I was assistant rabbi briefly at a synagogue. Um,
You said it's the what Orthodox?
yeah, it's what people call ultra Orthodox. So um, in most of not the United States,
Mhm.
almost all Judaism, like Reform and conservative Judaism, tends to be pretty small outside the United States. Um, so, like most people are what's called traditional. So they tend to go to Orthodox synagogues
Mhm.
and communities where everybody actually is Orthodox is often referred to as ultra Orthodox. Or sometimes the word used in Hebrew is Haredi. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, what's been going on for past 20 years or so, the Jewish community has really been splintering a lot more than it used to be.
Okay.
So the people who are secular are having less and less in common with the people who are religious. And like the religious community is growing, I don't want to say more radical, but more radical. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. More definitely I feel like they're taking harder stances on on things.
Well, yeah, I mean, now that, so the state of Israel obviously started in 1948, and the people who started it were very anti-religious. They were like Marxists. And so until the 60s and 70s, it was a very anti-religious, anti-Jewish society. Then in the 60s and 70s, it started turning. And, when I was in Israel around 2000, like there definitely was a growing.
Were you teaching at that point?
I was studying in a yeshiva, in a seminary.
Okay.
So I did a year in Jerusalem where I studied in a yeshiva. Um, and the religious community was growing, um, but over the past 20 years, like the left in Israel has really collapsed, like really collapsed. Like you look at the results of the latest elections, and the left has completely collapsed in Israel. Um, and so there are traditional people, and then there's the Haredi. And the Haredi, I mean, I forget how many seats they won out of 120, but it was above 20 seats, right? Which is a very large number for the actual Haredi seats, for the people who are like what's called ultra Orthodox. Um, so yeah, I mean, so the Jewish community, especially in Israel, because look, when you live in Israel, you can take all the Jewish holidays off. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier to be completely observant in Israel, where there's kosher
Mm.
food everywhere. Like the almost all the food is kosher. Um, and people. So there's this thing where people study the Talmud a page a day, right? And the cycle takes 7.5 years.
Mm.
So the latest cycle, there were over 100,000 people. It's not obvious how many people actually completed the entire Talmud, but it was over 100,000 people, and that is a shockingly large number of people to have studied the entirety of the Talmud. But
Mm.
when you think about the fact that, look, these are people, millions of Jews are suddenly growing up speaking Hebrew. It's not a second language. It's not an Aramaic isn't a third language. It's become a lot more feasible.
Right.
So like, um, there's definitely been a huge revival in Israel, and yeah, I mean, I was really astounded to see that. I mean, we don't know exactly how many people completed the entirety of the Talmud, but 100,000, as far as I know, that's the largest amount of Jews to have studied the entirety of the Talmud. Um, like I there's no way I could put in enough time to do that. If I wanted to do a page of Talmud a day, that would take me at least 3 hours every single day.
Man.
Yeah, so like the I was really floored. It was a year or two ago. They had the completion of the cycle, and well over 100,000 people finished it.
Man. Man. So was that like, do they keep records of that sort of thing?
They don't keep records, but there's a lot of um, so there's this ceremony called a siyum, which means completion, basically. So whenever you complete um, a, a major portion of learning, like so I have precisely one tractate of the Talmud to my name out of 60. So I finished one, and uh, I finished it once, and I had a siyum, and then I reviewed it, and I had a siyum. So you do a siyum every time you finish a large chunk of learning. Um, so there are these public siyums that they have, um, for what's called Daf Yomi, the daily Talmud study.
Mm.
And there were celebrations, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Israel, and that's where I got the number. Definitely over 100,000 people um, attended the various completion ceremonies.
Okay. Okay. And then, so do you think of religion? I don't know why I picked up that, like, maybe like you thought of it as like a code of behaviors or like rituals or um like eating, like definitely, like if you're part of a religion, would the eating practices, like, to call yourself part of that religion, how much like adherence to a code is that like?
So I mean, that's a really good question. What exactly do we mean by religion? I certainly believe that, so when there was the divide between Christianity and Judaism 2,000 years ago, one of the big divides, everybody agrees, was rabbinic Judaism ended up putting a stress on what's called orthopraxy, as opposed to Christianity put a more emphasis on what's called orthodoxy, right? And then with the Reformation, even more so, like Protestants, it's all about, Protestants have what you believe is what's important. And certainly in Orthodox Christianity, Catholic Christianity, it's more important to act. It's also important, to take part of the sacraments and all of that stuff. And in Judaism, I would say even more so. There are certain key beliefs that are very important, but the religion is definitely more focused on orthopraxy,
Okay.
which you know I really don't know how that jives. I guess Islam is as well. I don't know how that jives with other religions, but I think the people from the Reformation would agree that if if you have a certain faith, right? If you believe certain things, then that should manifest in how you live your life, right? So I I kind of, I sometimes rant that people, make distinctions that don't really matter, because it's not like even, the most Protestant, 5-point Calvinist, whatever you want to call it, is going to say that, you can act completely unchristian, be a violent,
Right.
pu- you know, um, and it doesn't matter. And I don't think, even the most, you know, even like ultra Orthodox Jews would say that it's completely irrelevant if you don't believe in the certain, in certain things,
Certain thing.
Um, so I mean, there's there's a there's a lot more discussion about this than I think it matters. Like we have two Hutterites on the Discord, right? And they're Anabaptists,
Okay.
right? And so they're like kind of like, you know 100% belief. At least that's where Anabaptism started, right? It's all about belief, it's all about, right? But when you
So how
look at
is
their
I'm
lifestyles.
like all I know about Anabaptists is that they don't stop you from being baptized twice, or they want to like are they baptized twice?
So Anabaptists, as opposed to most
Yeah.
Protestants, do not practice infant baptism at all.
Oh,
So they will only do what's called believers baptism,
right.
which most Protestants will baptize infants,
Hmm.
and then they will also um, they will also do believers baptism, right? Being reborn, and right, getting baptized again as an adult. Um, I mean, that's where the name comes from. I've been listening to this history series from on YouTube that's like been going through all of this stuff. So I've been learning a lot about it. It's really interesting stuff, I think.
Yeah. 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 No, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I just didn't know what Anabaptists believed. Yeah, I knew there was one of them on the Discord. Um,
We have two Hutterites on the Discord.
okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's like there's only I think there's like only 50,000 Hutterites in the world.
Geez.
So, and two of them are members of our Discord, and I
We're
think,
talking them.
most Hutterites don't join Discords.
Dude. Dude. Yeah, we're hogging them. Um, man. Man. So yeah, yeah. So I was definitely thinking about like when I asked you that, it was like, oh yeah, of course. Like if you are a member of a religion, like it would make sense that like eating practices were part of it. Like that's like I can see how that would help. Like
Well, I mean, I think we even notice that these days in the new religion that wokeism is, they've suddenly started having all of this, eat organic, eat sustainably, you know, paying attention to, um, you know, it seems like they've turned that into a whole, religious taboo type thing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think one of the possibly one of the most important things anybody's said recently was um, Brett Weinstein and Richard Dawkins in Chicago were having their discussion. It's available on YouTube. I highly recommend everybody watch it. But what what Brett Weinstein said was um, religion is part of the extended phenotype of human beings, right? So just like a badger will create a dam, and birds create nests, right? And cats have the behavior that they have. Humans, as part of our extended phenotype, religion is part of that.
Mm.
And I think he's very right about that. And I think the people who claim to be atheists, um I think a lot of them end up like replicating religion in ways that they don't even recognize themselves.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. No, totally, totally. Like I've seen that, and I've done some of that like myself, like admittedly.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. As far as like I remember um like on Sundays, like for a minute there, my thing was, oh, I'm gonna exercise really hard. Like this is like kind of like acting as if my body was um the church or wherever like I was, and I was just gonna like it was almost like, oh, this is make it like I'm gonna feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, setting rituals, setting routines, paying attention to what you eat, your ethics, these are things that human beings naturally do. Um, and I think, while I certainly do believe in God, right? For me, it's not one of these. I believe in God because a lot of the Jordan Peterson crowd have started in on the. I act like I believe in God. No, I actually believe in God. I do. Um, but at the same time, I think that it's pretty much impossible not to have some sort of belief in one of the things that various societies have called God, right? So, even people like Sam Harris, right? Well, he has a meditation app, and like people were making a lot of fun about when he said "thank goodness," right?
Yeah,
He tweeted
I've
out
seen the
"thank
meme.
goodness," um, and like we as human beings have religious behaviors, and I think when we try to ignore them, we actually end up just having worse than ha- trying to like strip out your religious behavior. I think usually
Mm.
ends up in far worse situation than if you were than when you actually, pick a religion and consciously decide, I want to ethically, these are my ethics, these are my morals, these are my values.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think I definitely like I've noticed people like I know is like there's these religious structures, but even if they don't like, there's still I feel like good people, and there's a ground of at least I don't know like what you would call it, a ground of ethic, and they're just not calling it God. It seems like it's like super. It's like humanistic, or it's just as um like they try and treat it just as sacred as you would God. Like I guess like constitutional values, or um like freedom of speech, or maybe something like in
Or
those
politics. Yeah,
in that arena. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. I think, part of the reason the atheists really disliked how Jordan Peterson would have very broad definitions of God is because I think a lot of them realize that by those definitions, they also believe in God. And they're like, no, 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 you're trying to trick me into not being an atheist, right? Um, and I don't think it's a trick. Like, this is one of the
right,
things, I actually, this is something I've done for years. I don't write out the word God. I write G-D, which is a Jewish custom, um, because I really love, the Jewish God has always been ineffable, right? Like, we don't say his name, right? We don't, like, we're really careful in describing God because, we realize that it is beyond our capacity to really name God, right?
right.
Um, and I,
To even encapsulate it so that you know what it is you're like naming. Yeah, yeah. To encapsulate God. Yeah, exactly.
right, and that's why I always really loved this custom. You know, just I think it really reminds
The
me,
G/D custom.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
not writing out the word God, right? And paying attention because it really stops me, like, if I'm writing something, right? And especially like when you comment on the internet or something, right? And because it really identifies you. If you're going to talk about God, and I will not write God. um it makes me think twice about writing the word God, right? Because, yeah, you kind of pour your identity into that when you do something like that.
yeah, yeah. And it's sort of, I mean, it adds a. You pour your identity into it if you write G/D, or if you write.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. No, definitely,
yeah,
definitely.
because
Yeah,
it identifies you. When I'm talking about God, I'm talking about, the Jewish God. I am identifying myself as somebody who believes in this,
yes.
you know
Ineffable.
yeah.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I just, I think that's what a lot of people are missing, the ineffable nature of God. I think that's part of the problem PBK talks about, God one and God two, the sky God, that the atheists, they're like, the super thing. Um, and I, when I think if an acknowledgement that God is ineffable kind of dissolves that, sky god, flying spaghetti monster, super thing concept of God, right? my
right.
the God I'm talking about isn't, you know i I hate to pick on the Catholics, but I'm going to pick on the Catholics. Like, the that image from the Sistine Chapel of, like, God touching Adam, and he's this old man,
Right.
right? So the Eastern Orthodox will not make icons of the Father. So they absolutely will not make any icon of the Father, right? Um, and yeah, so like I just think that image has done so much damage to the Western psyche, because for so many people, God has become that picture.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. No, I definitely like lay. I'll definitely have moments where I lay that onto. It's like the image my mind uses is something like uh yeah, yeah, like the sky daddy. Like I've I've it definitely informs it. It overlays basically.
Yeah, yeah. God's an old man, sitting up in the on a cloud.
Yeah, yeah, and I think so. I think when you I only say there's something to that because I do think that when you encounter um, something, like when you encounter culture, I feel like that's the image, like that's the category. Like if the categories are mother, father, and yourself, when you encounter culture, it uses that image to relate to it at first, like before it's like um, more articulate, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of find, I mean, I don't like the exclusive identifying of God as masculine. First of all, I don't think that's
Mm,
biblical at all.
okay.
Um, because, especially the line in Genesis that says, uh, God created man in the image of God. It says he created us male and female, right? So,
Is that so? That's actually people get those two like mixed up. They think it says God created man in His image.
well, a lot of people think that it's only the masculine.
Yes, yes. It's only talking about men when it says
Right, right. And like Christians even refer to the Holy Spirit as masculine, which in Judaism we refer to as feminine. Not that it matters so much, but just, I mean, I dislike the idea that God is a man, right? I think that that's really limiting of God, and I don't think it's biblical. That's not what Genesis
yeah.
says.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 No, I agree with that, and I thought I've tried to think about it for a little bit, because they're even though the image is sort of father like, um, it's also nourishing and things that are revitalized. Like that's kind of a like I think about it, I'm like, oh, that's sort of like a feminine bent, but that's just my own like thoughts. Like,
Well, I mean, are you into Jung or what?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I really don't think there is a collective conscious.
Okay,
I don't um I don't think there is a universal symbolism, because I've just seen so much like that's different. But I do think that in certain ways we have like certain things that are biological universals between all human beings.
okay.
Um, so I I struggle with Jung. I struggle with Jung. I'm not the biggest fan of Jung. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a good place to start with thinking about archetypes is like a shared experience that like you everyone can relate to, and it's on like a biological level. Um, and I definitely believe that's like true. Like that's the case. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been wanting to read more Jung, but it's sort of it seems like and we can just like uh, cut this out because I don't know if it'll be like any good. But like I've been reading Jung, and I've been trying to see how he relates to the church fathers. But the thing about the church fathers, it seems like they are so focused on the experience, and they don't like they don't look at the psychology. They just like it seems like they experience it. So they're writing like they're writing as if it's like real and plain as day almost, if that like makes sense, whereas Jung kind of like tries to like take a step back or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think part of that, you know, for people in modern, we live in modernity, right? And I think for us to look at ancient texts, like I've always been very interested in ancient texts, and I've studied ancient texts. And I think we often come from either a modern or postmodern way of looking at things that the pre-moderns, right? The like the church fathers or other ancient writings, they just were not as concrete to people as a modern view of it really kind of makes us feel, right? So I don't, so this comes up a lot when we're discussing like the the actual, for example, when we discuss in Acts or even just the book of John, right? I I don't think that the author of the book of John thought that anybody actually thought he was recording exact dialogue between Jesus and Pilate, right? I think for him, it was, as a pre-modern, it was understood that I am relating ideas in this form of a dialogue between people, right? And I think a lot of people take it very, very literally as like a transcript, right? As if somebody had sat there and written down the words as people were speaking.
Yeah.
And
I
so
actually I have not read the Book of John. I need to read more
of the
the
gospels and stuff,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
it's any of them. I mean, when you look at the gospels, they don't match up exactly,
Right.
right? There are things, and I don't think that was a huge problem for the church fathers, for more ancient people,
Right.
right? And the Talmud does similar things. Like there's discussions about people who obviously we know did not live at the same time, right? So it talks about people talking to each other who couldn't possibly have actually spoken to each other, but it's conveying information in that form. And to us today, right, we we look at that as almost a betrayal, right? If I were to write a dialogue between, um, let's say, I don't know, Jesus and Augustine or whatever, right? If I were to write a dialogue and say, and not clearly say this is fiction, people would accuse me of trying to pass some, it's like you're committing some sort of fraud.
Right. Right.
Whereas for the pre-moderns, I don't think they thought of things in the same way. And so it causes a lot of confusion when we look in a modern framework back at things that were written thousands of years ago, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. We definitely like I'm still very compelled by the idea of like the historical Jesus, like looking into that and trying to find, the concrete like nuggets. Like for some reason, that's very um like I think there's something to that, like feeling like a calling to something, but I don't know like uh why exactly that's so compelling.
Well, I
Why it seems like so important. I think it is partly because of like a modern impulse, but I don't know what you think about that.
yeah, I mean, I really think one of the things that empiricism and modernity and, the whole idea of the correspondence theory of truth, right? If I have a dialogue between Jesus and one of his disciples, right? It's in a modern framework, it's only true if um, Jesus actually said those exact words to that exact person. Whereas in a pre modern framework, I think they would consider it true as long as it conveyed the teachings of Jesus
Mm,
to his disciples,
okay.
right? And that's why, you I think certain people take, for example, the Gospels very literally, right? And they want to, they try to make it work in such a way that it's 100% an accurate recording of everything Jesus said. Whereas I think, you know, pre-modern people would understand, okay, we don't necessarily have um so there are stories, right? There are stories that we tell in the Jewish community, which are, you know, or even Muslims similarly tell stories about Muhammad, right? And these stories, nobody expects them to be 100% exact, right? Um, and that's known, right? Within the Hasidic community, it's known that the stories people tell of the Baal Shem Tov, not all of them are 100% exact, but they're meant to convey a truth. Or Muslims say the same thing about stories of Muhammad, but from a very modern point of view, we've started looking at the Gospels um, and at ancient writings as either this corresponds 100% with actual events that happened as they are recorded, or they're worthless, right? And especially like the new atheists and stuff will say, if it's not literally true exactly as it is said or as it is written, then they just discard it without even trying to see the more metaphorical truth that it may hold,
Right,
right?
right. It's yeah, yeah, totally.
And I think that's part of what, Jordan Peterson's really brought back for a lot of people, the ability to, pay attention to the allegorical, to the metaphoric, right? um and really to drink of that ancient wisdom that we have, um which, I mean, I really think this is one of the biggest problems we have these days, is people are, they just think anything that's old is worthless by virtue of the fact that it is old.
Right, right. right. Yeah. I forgot what the quote was. It's like the very first quote in like how he opens up maps of meaning. Um, I'll put it like right here or something. It's something like the um, oh gosh, uncovering things, like uncovering the foundations of the world, or like something having to do with like finding like people are missing the meaning, and he's gonna like show you a whole lot of it.
Yeah, I have so many books on my reading list. I haven't gotten around to Maps of Meaning yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I started it.
yeah, I have so many books sitting around here that I haven't, that I'm halfway through. I'm halfway through like four different books right now.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I've definitely like me. I'm like no more, no more until I read like 5 or 10 of these suckers. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's funny how we do that, and then I'll sit and I'll watch like YouTube videos all day.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
like I
yeah,
should be reading.
yeah.
Um,
That's good though. Yeah, yeah. So I don't know how you're like I don't know how you're doing on time or
I'm good with whatever. I mean, I was just gonna be watching YouTube videos anyway, so like,
right
yeah,
on, right on.
I I I, I have all the time you need. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, if you like want to do, oh, okay. So if you want to, like, uh, like if you want to talk again about like the Trinity, if you want to give people like a a sort of like an overview of like your, and I'm just gonna say Unitarian for lack of like I don't have any other word in my mind. Just like what your beliefs are there, or like the whys to your beliefs, or yeah.
So so I came to Christianity from a very different way than most people. Um, so I mean, I have been very involved with religion, and Judaism has always been my religion. So the idea of a human being God has always been something that like I just rejected out of hand, right? So the idea that God could be contained within a human being and then die, right? The idea, like, I just find the idea of deicide just absurd, right? Because if you can kill God and you believe in one God, then like, what happens when you kill God, right? If it's the one God, right? Um, so that had always kind of like been a wall between me and Christianity, right? And then when I got involved in this community,
Hmm.
so basically what I started to do a lot was, as opposed to arguing about Christian ideas with Christians, what I started doing was when people would be talking about something that had a history and context within Judaism, um, which I mean I tend to have more um, context within Judaism than most people on the server, right? Um, I I started explaining the context, especially of the things that like Jesus would say in the Gospels. And through that, I I ended up actually like exploring the teachings of Jesus himself, without a lot of the things that people consider to be essential to Christianity, like the Trinity, right? Because 99.9% of all Christians are Trinitarians of one sort or another. Um, and I started to see a Christianity that wasn't Trinitarian, right? That didn't, and you know, I wasn't aware that the word Trinity doesn't show up anywhere in the Christian Bible at all. You know,
Right.
and like Sam makes a very convincing argument that, you know, it it isn't anywhere within Christianity,
And this is
right? And I
Sam
and I
Adams.
certainly, yeah, Sam Adams, you're right. Yeah. And I certainly I see, like, n- now that I've been able to divorce Christianity from certain things which I find absolutely completely foreign to my conception of God, like the Trinity, like the idea of God dying, right? Um, so I've been able to kind of rediscover a Jewish Christianity which did exist, right? So 2,000 years ago, there were these groups like the Ebionites and the Nazarenes, and there is actually somewhat of a revival of that, you know, and there have been, you know, through time there have been Unitarian Christians, and it really does seem to be growing. And then when we talk, you know, there's all the Eastern Orthodox on the Discord server. A lot of them believe in what's called monarchical Trinitarianism, as opposed to Western Trinitarianism, which, while I still have problems with the Trinity, like just ascribing any other than one to God, you know, I see no biblical basis for, and I can't agree to. But the Eastern Orthodox, they say it's that only the Father is God, right? Is true God, right? And they like they won't make icons of the Father,
Right.
right? And I find that to be a lot more acceptable than the Western concept of the Trinity, where Jesus is co-eternal with God, right? It's like, well, if he's eternal, then how did he die, right? It just seems to me that, um, I mean, it really seems to me that the Trinity, uh, I I cannot see how Christians have turned it into a a basic principle of faith, right? And this was part of what I was talking with Andrea about, right? So when she said sola scriptura means that, look, if it's an important idea, it should be written down in the Bible. Well, I agree with that. I think that if something is an important idea, God would have explained it in the Bible to us, right? I think that the most important parts of the faith are there in the Bible itself. But then, if that's what you're going to say, um, where's the Trinity in the Bible, right? And while people try to derive the Trinity out of the Bible, I think when you challenge them on it the way Sam does, um, they have a really hard time doing it. And frankly, you know, I think a lot of people fail, right? And I think a lot of people are just not. I think it was Andrew who said people aren't used to being poked in the axioms so hard,
Right.
right? Um, and on the Discord, we really seem to be poking into axioms, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and it gets people. Some people don't like it, but I would actually love if people would challenge me more. Like I don't know if you've seen my arguments with Charlie, right? Like we go at it in the forum a
Okay.
lot.
Okay. I
Um,
haven't.
yeah, and I, that's great fun for me. I love that type of stuff, but you know, a lot of people don't. Uh, but yeah, I think I agree with Sam. To my surprise, I don't think that the Trinity is actually a fundamental belief of Christians. Um, I mean, yes, most Christians will say that it is,
Right.
but it's not in the Bible. So if you want to believe that, you have to tell me why. Well, you don't have to, but um, if you expect me to take you seriously, you should be able to explain to me why this fundamental aspect of your faith is not in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Why is something that's not clearly spelled out in the Bible something that you're willing to throw people out of church for? And Sam has been kicked out of, I believe, at least 2 churches so far
Hmm.
for not believing in the Trinity.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's. I mean, it sounds like um a challenge. I've never took issue with the idea. I have had some like with the idea just that like God is like God and Christ or like Christ is God because I think well I guess I've never had issues with ideas that were that uh big and sort of like crazy almost like there's something I think very it almost like when you relate to this uh and I don't know like if my beliefs are like way out there but like when you relate to this God who was a man it makes you it you relate to yourself a little bit differently um almost like oh things are like big things are possible for me I guess um so that's the only like I was just trying to like why do I believe this and I think like it's in the tradition for some reason but you've given me I'm like okay let's find like the ground for this
So what are your beliefs? Like, do you consider yourself a Protestant, a
um
Catholic?
okay so the way I've been thinking about it for a while and I think like I believe in seeing the best in people like that's for me that's like finding the little Jesus in people and seeing that like that's and seeing that and trying to be um bring that out in people but I'm definitely I think I am Trinitarian um but I wouldn't I don't have a category at the moment. I'm okay. So my sentiments lean towards like the one that I think I'd be most, the one I'm drawn to most is Catholicism, and I think it has something to do with the like the structure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so this idea of finding the divinity, I I kind of think that part of the reason that the Trinity developed was because people had difficulty with this Jewish idea that every single one of us are made in the image of God, right? And when you say that, when you say, "I am the Son of God," right? People are like, "You think you're Jesus?"
Right.
Right? Um, but the fact of the matter is that that's what the Bible teaches, right? That we are all the children of God, um, and it refers all through the Bible, right? And this is one of the things, uh, Jesus quotes. He says, "Isn't it written that you are all children of the Most High?" Right? And Sam pointed this out to me. He said a lot of Christians seem to think that when Jesus said that, he was blaspheming, whereas as a Unitarian, he no longer, he doesn't believe that's blasphemy. For me to say, "You, Shane, are the Son of God," right? You are made in the image of God.
Right.
But people find that shocking,
Right.
right?
It's much I think like I'm like, oh yeah, shame. There's feelings of like shame that like not worthy, and it's much more it's shocking, but it's easier to take in some ways from someone from the outside, or if you, I mean, I think there's a way to say it to yourself that doesn't doesn't blow you up like crazily. But yeah, there's a lot, or like it just doesn't like blow you up, I guess.
Well, I mean, so how do you feel when you think I am a child of God?
It's like a well, first there's like the like a little bit of, I don't know if the right word is shame, but then after that it's, I guess it's uh like a humility, or like the yeah, humility might be the right word, I guess.
Do you feel comfortable actually saying I am a son of God? Like, do is
uh,
that a statement you feel comfortable saying yourself?
no.
But it's true.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's hard to say, but it's, yeah.
And I think really I think that's part of what's been lost in the translation. You know,
And
when
biblical.
when we say, "Our Father, who art in heaven," right? It's I think a lot of people really don't that's not concrete to them, right? When we call God the Father, we think of him as someone else's father. We don't think of him as my father,
Right, right.
right? So we and and I think that's really the root of why people have such a hard time with um with a lot of Jesus's teachings.
Hmm.
I think, it's a lot easier to say Jesus is God's son than it is to say Shane is God's son. It's a lot easier to say God is Jesus's father than it is to say God is my father, right? Um, and I, I just think that's a fundamental mistake we make, and people really do um, find it shocking, right? When you know people find it shocking and disturbing, and I think they need to stop because that is what the Bible says.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah. I've got so much that just a lot to learn.
Well, um, that's another thing I keep on pointing out to people is you know every religion I know of refers to itself as a path or a way, right? It's and a lot of people think of religion as something you arrive at and then it's there, right? And they like they don't think of it as a process, you know.
Right.
um I my beliefs about God have changed a lot throughout my life. Like, um, what I believed a year ago is not what I believe today, and what I believed 10 years ago is not what I believe today. And you know, and I think that may actually be the most important part of religion is the process of growth and learning. Um, and people who kind of feel like, oh well, once I do this I have arrived, right? This They have this binary sense of saved not saved, right? So um i i I learn this stuff and I get baptized and I do this and I perform such and such sacrament or not, and then I am saved, and that's the end of the process. And basically, um, they kind of think their spiritual life is over, and I just think that's such a wrong way of looking at the whole process.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And I think those things, they're definitely like important. Like you didn't say they weren't. Like I think there's like maybe one way of thinking about it is like a chapter. Um but but yeah, yeah.
So when did you start on this? I mean, obviously you haven't been religious since you were a little kid.
So me, yeah, yeah. So this has been like probably the past, I mean, so really probably the past like year and a half. Um and then before that, like I just like uh went through like the cycles of belief. I think the past year and a half really consciously trying to like learn this sort of thing and like
So why do you do it?
um well, fulfill like I fulfillment like I want to live well. Part of it, I think most of it has to do with that kind of like how I feel, um
Mhm.
having like done this and worked on it and thought about it. Um I think that has a lot to do with it. Is um the feeling. It's sort of like it just feels like a need, and maybe that's like the religious um
Instinct.
something like that, maybe. Yeah, yeah.
And where do you see yourself going on this path?
Um, on I don't like. There's okay. So honestly, there's been like I know I want to learn about it, and like there's been moments where I'm like, oh, I might end up one of those guys in the streets, just like praising God almost, like and trying to like tell people the right things or have or go yeah, yeah. um but that's just like thoughts I've had. um but yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Has it changed your life already?
Oh, yes, yeah.
May I ask how?
um just I guess a lot of it has to do with I think community and interacting with people, with someone gives you an experience like, oh, this is this is I don't want to mix my words up, but maybe like communion. I don't know. Like this is like having an interaction with someone like, oh, this is it. Like this is um
I think the communion is actually a very good word for that. But so has it also been in physical real life with people, or is it just
mostly
online?
so mostly through the Discord, but it bleeds. I feel like it bleeds through into my experiences. Like I'm um like my interactions with other people. Yeah, yeah. No, there's definitely been some strong experiences with other people. Yeah, yeah. Like at work, just like trying to like lend a hand or something, or be more yeah, it's definitely been uh learning these things. It's definitely been a boon to like life.
So have you started going to church or anything like that?
So I was going to I want to find a I might find a Catholic church near me. Because that would be the most like economical, but there's a Orthodox monastery up near where I was born, but it's pretty far, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be going to that one. Um,
Oh,
but
an Orthodox monastery. That
yeah,
sounds interesting.
yeah, it's pretty cool. I'll show you a link, and it's an OCA, so it's all like English. Um, Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you've had the experience of, for some reason, every Orthodox monastery. So I feel like and I haven't like spoken about this, but I feel like every Orthodox, like the priest and all the, like, he seemed just like a really cool guy who, like just normal guys, like it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really met any Orthodox priests, but um, I just find it so interesting that there's this draw to orthodoxy on the Discord. Like Paul is a Calvinist,
Hmm.
and we have Father Eric, who's a Roman Catholic,
Yeah,
but it seems like people on the server are trending towards Eastern Orthodoxy,
yeah, yeah.
which it's I mean, it's strange,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, Luke and Nate both were baptized recently, Eastern Orthodox.
Okay.
Um, and like people are buying icons and things like that. And it's, I mean, who would have thunk it? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
suddenly in the year 2020, um, this internet community, um, that's formed around a Calvinist pastor,
Yeah.
is like exploring Eastern Orthodoxy.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I've definitely felt like in like that's I think that's the reason like well I've definitely felt the like an impulse to I don't know like and I think of it a little bit in Jungian terms like I found myself like being more interested in more like uh modernist ideas and it's almost like oh is my mind trying to like have a balance for all this ancient stuff that I'm taking but I'm not sure like
Well,
is it a balance.
there's a real draw to liturgy and like
Hmm.
ritual, and I think a lot of people, especially, in the United States, in our modern culture, I think we don't have rituals of absolution and, you know um, ancient wisdom and, just veneration and beauty, right? Have you heard of Roger Scruton?
Yes, yes.
So he was really big on this thing of, you know, going back to actual beauty, right? Um, trying to look for beautiful art. And that's something that's like bothered me a lot about postmodernism is, it seems to constantly be, like pushing the ugly on towards us, like making us look at things that are ugly as art, you know? And I think part of this, um draw that a lot of people have to like Eastern Orthodox icons or, more ancient things is an appreciation for the beautiful, um, and it almost seems like it's taboo in our society to really appreciate something, right? You're if you show you care about something, then, people, you know there's this troll culture, right, of mocking everything and turning everything into memes and into, um, comedy and stuff, and I think there's a natural sense of wanting to worship, right, to, hold something out as beautiful and
Right,
worthy of adoration.
right.
And I think that's part of why people are looking back at orthodoxy, right? Looking back at these icons and these rituals, because it's like, well, can't we have things we say are beautiful?
Yeah, yeah, and something separate from all this, I guess. Yeah, yeah, and I think the church does for some people it is that like small kernel for them.
Yeah. I forget who was telling me. It might have been Shari, but, the Eastern Orthodox, they don't actually have pews in their churches. They stand up the whole time. They don't sit down at all,
Okay, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And,
I didn't know they were the only one.
I think they're the only ones who like, I think they only have chairs for people who are like elderly and stuff.
Right.
Um, and I think. in I mean, I understand that um that type of desire for something that's like, or even like fasting, right? To do something that's difficult, just to, you know stand for hours on end,
Right.
or not to be maximally comfortable and materialistic, to look for something that's more important than the material.
Yeah. Yeah. No. No. Definitely. Definitely. I think that's uh important. Yeah. I didn't know. Um. Yeah. I don't know if they're the only ones who do that, but I think there's. I mean that goes. I mean that might go back to biology too. Like when you're um standing, you're going to like you might be primed to take more in at that point.
I think you definitely probably are more alert, you
Hmm.
know. Yeah, I mean, it, it seems to me that we've lost so much in we've lost so much in, just like, Chester's, Chesterton's fence.
No,
Okay. So this
I
is the
like that.
idea that if you come upon a fence in the middle of nowhere, you shouldn't um, you shouldn't tear down the fence until you know why it was built to begin with, right? So it's the conservative impulse, right? That I'm not going to destroy something just because I don't know why it's there, or just because I can, or just because I think it's useless, right? And I think we go in these cycles where, we have a lot of respect for tradition, and then it seems like, it feels like it's too much, and we're doing a lot of things that we don't know why we're doing them, and we don't understand them, and we think they may be a waste of time and a waste of effort, right? And we try to clear those things away, right? So we we kind of go towards a, like, fundamentalism, like getting back to root things, and then um, I guess the pendulum just keeps on swinging back and forth, because we then realize, hey, hold on, like, we may have taken too much off, right? Um, and it seems like that is kind of what's going on in our religious life. We've gone too far in, like, the secularity, and um getting rid of ritual, and getting rid of, a sense of community. I think we've become too individualistic, right? To the point where a lot of us are feeling alone, and we want community again, and we want belonging, and yeah, communion. I think communion is the right word for it, right? We're seeking communion, um, because we've become so um, particular, right? We've become so individual and separate from each other.
Right, right, right. It's like maybe nuclear is the right word.
I'm gonna have to think about it. I'm gonna
Okay.
have to think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's like yeah, I think that might be like a good place to like stop and maybe pick up later if you want, because there's plenty of examples that I have to think of the of Chesterton's chair.
Fence.
Fence.
Fence, yeah.
Yeah.
And my dog wants me to take her for a walk. So
Dude, right.
I am going to take my dog for a walk. And we'll think about this and we'll probably do it again sometime.
Yeah. Dude, thank you so much.
Sure. I'll talk
All
to you
right.
later, Shane.
Later, man.